Michael, welcome to Bookshots.
Thank you.
What do you define as difficult behaviour in a child?
What's become apparent is that crossing the line falls into three major things I call big rocks. The big rocks really are speaking or acting rudely, hurting someone else or yourself, or wrecking things. Now those three big rocks, if you like, I reckon they cover about 90% of what people say is difficult behaviour.
So what's the most common mistake that parents make generally?
Look, that's a really tricky one. I think that most people don't feel good about yelling or screaming at their kids or smacking their kids. They know, at least the parents that I used to see, would often come in and they'd say, I don't like myself for doing this, I feel some guilt about doing this, but I wasn't sure what to do instead. And it's the instead part, I think, that has been missing for quite a long time.
So as well as being a book that's got lots of helpful hints for parents, there are some techniques that you've got in this book which are for children to learn, and one of my favourite ones was toggling. Would you like to explain what toggling is?
Sure. In children's minds, and for that matter in our minds, there's what's called the old brain and the new brain. The old brain is a place in our mind where we have impulses. We might get angry from our old brain emotionally. We might feel frustration or annoyance or something. And in the front of our brain, just behind our forehead, in a place called the prefrontal cortex, is the place where we order things. It's the kind of the new brain, if you like. And the new brain's job is to help us order our thinking, think about planning, limit ourselves. And sometimes what happens is that children need help to make those connections. Now it happens as a function of age. In other words, you would expect a 10-year-old to be better than a 5-year-old at being able to limit him or herself. And as children grow up, 15 should be better than 5, believe it or not, and 20 should be better than 10, for example. But there are some really good things that parents can do to help their children to work between the two brains. And essentially what toggling is this ability to trade information between two parts of your mind at the same time. We do it as adults when we're in a tricky social encounter and we might feel quite angry at somebody, but there's a part of us that's saying, keep your cool, hold it together. And that trading of information, which we can do, we can be quite cross about something, but we can also hold ourselves or limit ourselves as well.
Do you think that in a sense parenting is harder in the 21st century than it used to be because suddenly you've got to have rules about computers on top of everything else, social media? There are so many new factors in the landscape.
Yeah, sure. Yes is the answer. I think that part of the difficulty is there are competing outside influences that kind of draw our children's attention away, and I wouldn't have thought that they're all good influences in the sense that children's attention is more fractured. So if we're talking about our ability to self-regulate, which is about taking stock of how we feel in a certain situation and then being able to manage it, and we're trying to teach this to children as well, it is increasingly more difficult in an environment that's more fractured out there. There's also quite an epidemic in sleep deprivation amongst children and young people, for that matter, that's been around now for at least the last 10 years, where they're not getting adequate rest. And if you don't rest the prefrontal cortex, it can't do its job when it's awake properly.
Do you think another problem, Michael, is that perhaps parents today want their children to like them? They want to be seen as their children's friends rather than parents, and parents are about boundaries and about that word that no one wants to say anymore, discipline.
Yes, I think there is a bit of a lack of trust in your own attachment to your children and your children's attachment to you, which is enormous. Like, it is so enormous. And I don't think a lot of parents trust that. And so when it comes to putting our children in uncomfortable moments, they find that really difficult. Do you see? But in order to actually make the brakes work, you actually have to tolerate a bit of discomfort in them while they're trying to get it all happening. for themselves. So I think there is a bit of that going around. I also think there's been a strong message over the years, certainly in the last decade, that we should mostly be positive with our children. And if you're not riding that positive wave, you're in all sorts of difficulty. And people haven't found what to put there instead, if that makes sense. Look, praising and rewarding children is not going to help them use their brakes. All right, it's just not going to do it. And if you praise and reward maybe too much, they'll go on X Factor when they shouldn't.
If you had to give just one piece of advice to parents who are absolutely stretched to the limit, have no idea what to do to control a child that's displaying the most bratish behaviour, what's your single most effective instant improver of bad behaviour in kids?
Okay, well, you've got to work out what you're going to go into bat for and what you're going to let go through to the keeper. So first thing is work out the behaviour that's just unacceptable, and then work out some strategies to keep yourself calm. Try not to do things in a rash moment or with temper or anger, because if we're trying to teach them self-regulation and we don't self-regulate, we're in all sorts of strife. I mean, a good way of thinking about this is thinking about the way that pilots and paramedics learn their job. They don't do that in the emergency, they learn it before the emergency. And a way of thinking about our job as a parent is to get some good parent education, find ways in which you can learn some of the skills you need to do away from the crisis that's occurring.